Urban foraging under fire. World War II stealth food scavenging tactics that still work today. Before we begin, if you are serious about forgotten history, survival under pressure, and the lessons modern society keeps relearning the hard way, subscribe to After the Sirens and leave a comment below sharing which wartime survival topic you want explored next. This channel exists for people who study history not as nostalgia, but as instruction. When air raid sirens wailed across London, Berlin, Warsaw, and Leningrad, hunger followed as predictably as the bombs. Food systems collapsed quickly in wartime cities. Supply chains failed, markets emptied, rations shrank. What separated survival from starvation was not luck, but knowledge. Ordinary civilians learned how to move quietly, observe carefully, and extract calories from environments stripped bare by war. Urban foraging during World War II was not a romantic act. It was a disciplined, calculated practice shaped by danger, surveillance, and scarcity. These methods were developed under occupation, blackout conditions, and constant threat, and they remain relevant today for anyone studying urban resilience. This guide examines how civilians scavenged food in hostile cities during World War II, how they avoided detection, and how these tactics can still be applied legally and ethically as preparedness knowledge in the modern urban environment. By 1941, cities across Europe were no longer supported by countryside surplus. Rail lines were bombed, ports blockaded, and farms requisitioned for armies. In besieged cities like Leningrad, daily caloric intake dropped below survival levels. Civilians responded by expanding their definition of food. Anything organic became a potential resource. Parks, bomb craters, rooftops, riverbanks, abandoned lots, and even ornamental plants were quietly harvested. This was not random scavenging. It was systematic. People learned seasonal cycles fast. They tracked which weeds emerged earliest, which trees produced edible leaves, and which roots could be extracted without tools. They learned that dandelion, nettle, plantain, and sorrel survived bombardment better than crops. Today, the lesson is clear. Cities still grow food unintentionally. Sidewalk cracks, drainage ditches, and neglected green spaces remain calorie sources for those trained to recognize them. Foraging during the Second World War was dangerous not because of the plants, but because of people. Occupying forces, local police, and even desperate neighbors watched closely. Carrying visible food could make you a target. Civilians learned to forage invisibly. They moved during low-visibility hours, often early morning or during air raids when attention was elsewhere. Tools were concealed. Harvesting was spread out to avoid noticeable depletion in one area. A practical example still applies today. Instead of stripping one location clean, foragers would harvest small amounts from many different places. This approach reduced the chances of being detected and at the same time helped preserve regrowth for the future. Knowledge of concealment really mattered. Leaves were, hidden under clothing, and roots were cleaned indoors. Smells, too, were carefully controlled. Cooking was done quietly or sometimes communally, just to avoid drawing any unwanted attention. These days, the modern application isn't really about hiding from soldiers. It's more about discretion, legality, and, honestly, sustainability in urban environments. Bombing reshaped cities in a very physical way. Rubble actually created microclimates where wild plants could thrive. Broken water lines would leave patches of damp soil, and abandoned buildings offered both shade and warmth. Civilians quickly noticed that in a strange way, destruction often produced new growth. In Berlin and Hamburg, rubble fields became informal gardens. In London, allotments replaced lawns. People foraged not only from nature, but, also from neglect. The lesson here is environmental reading. WWII survivors learned to read damage as opportunity. Modern cities experience abandonment, economic decline, and infrastructure failure in cycles. Vacant lots and forgotten corners often produce edible plants untouched by commercial agriculture. Knowing how to identify safe zones away from pollution sources remains critical, just as wartime civilians avoided areas near factories or fuel dumps. Protein was by far the hardest resource to replace. Civilians adapted ruthlessly, often out of sheer necessity. Pigeons, sparrows, rats and fish from canals suddenly became absolutely vital sources of nourishment. Trapping these creatures was a silent affair, and, methods were often improvised on the spot. Wire snares, homemade hooks, and all sorts of repurposed materials became quite common. These practices demanded a bit of anatomical knowledge, a lot of patience, and, frankly, extreme discretion. A practical takeaway here is not about repeating these acts casually, but rather about understanding protein scarcity under stress. Civilians during the Second World War learned to preserve what little protein they had using techniques like drying, salting, and stewing even the lowest quality cuts just to extract the maximum possible nutrition. Knowledge of bone broth organ use and slow cooking really kept people alive back then. These are lessons that, honestly, modern survivalists often overlook in favor of gear-heavy solutions. Urban foraging was rarely a solo activity. Information sort of moved quietly through trusted circles. People exchanged plant locations, cooking methods, and, even warnings. Those isolated died sooner. Mutual aid increased survival odds dramatically. This, really mirrors modern disaster studies, where community resilience outperforms individual preparedness. Applied today, this reinforces the importance of shared knowledge, local plant identification, seasonal awareness, and ethical harvesting. They all benefit from community exchange. World War II civilians did not hoard information. They understood that tomorrow's survival depended on collective adaptation. World War II stripped civilization down to fundamentals. Food, water, shelter, and discretion mattered more than ideology. Urban foraging became a discipline combining botany, situational awareness, and restraint. These were not, primitive skills. They were adaptive intelligence under pressure. For modern viewers of After the Sirens, this topic matters because cities remain fragile systems. Studying how civilians survived the worst urban crises in history provides practical insight without fantasy. Knowledge weighs nothing, it travels anywhere. And when systems fail, it feeds you. If this guide expanded your understanding of wartime survival beyond the battlefield, subscribe to After the Sirens, share this video with someone who studies history seriously, and leave a comment with the next forgotten survival topic you want uncovered. History only matters if we learn from it.